Well, it's about 3 minutes past the hour of 11. Out of courtesy to your time and appreciation, we'd like to go ahead and get started with our presentation this morning. My name is Ed Condon. I'm the Executive Director with the Region 9 Head Start Association. I'm so pleased to be with you this morning and to have our guests join us for this Innovation Series webinar, Picking Up the Pieces. Dr. Amy Payne is a child developmentalist specializing in children's social emotional development. She's a mother of twins who is no stranger to publishing articles, public speaking, and presentations. She's the president of Your Child and Family Solutions Consulting, and of course the founder of a fun item called the Ouchie Wrap, which I hope she'll share a little bit of information. And Amy, it's so good to see you, and I want to thank you personally. We've been colleagues and friends for quite a number of years. I've watched you as a consultant, as an advocate, and now as a mom, and now in your consulting business. So thank you so much for being with us. And I'm going to go ahead and turn the webinar over to you, and I look forward to listening in. And I'll be listening for comments as they come along in the chat. I do want to remind everyone this is being recorded. Once the webinar is over, in about 24 to 48 hours, you'll receive a link to this webinar so you can rewatch it. We also post these up on our YouTube channel so you can share it with your colleagues or use it for training purposes within your agency. We welcome that. And of course, I'm sure Amy will provide her contact information if you wish to get in touch with her as well. So with that, Dr. Payne, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. And pick this up. Okay. Oh. Are we on there yet? No, I don't think we are. Okay. All right.
I stopped sharing mine, so you should be able to pick it up and share yours.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect.
Okay. Now we have it together. Thank you for your patience there. Again, I'm Amy. I'm so glad to be here with you today. But before we get started, I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to acknowledge the tragedy that took place in our nation yesterday. I am currently sitting in San Antonio, just 75 miles away from the community of Uvalde, and I would like to stop and take a moment of silence out of reverence and respect for the families, teachers, and community who are hurting today. So if you would please join me in this silence. Thank you. So as Ed said, I'm the mother of twins. I have two 11-year-old twins. I'm a former caregiver and teacher for toddlers, preschoolers, kindergartners, and college students, and the former executive director of the Washington State Association of Head Start and ECAP, and the former deputy director of the Washington State Department of Early Learning. When Ed asked if I would join you all today with this webinar, I was so truly honored and humbled. And I'm grateful to his team at Region 9 Head Start Association for this opportunity to share the ideas on my heart and my mind to empower and support our community. You know, just thinking about even what happened yesterday, it isn't lost on me that we're literally talking about how to pick up the pieces and tips and strategies to help meet kids' social emotional needs while putting ourselves back together again. That's in the face of trauma, any trauma. And I think that even though it's very difficult, it's very timely in that way as well. So I actually wrote this book for you. In it, I even talk about what it means to have a Head Start heart, because that's important. And as participants today in the webinar, I would appreciate it if you would go ahead and use the chat to interact, just share your thoughts or questions throughout the presentation. It's really important and special to me that as participants today, y'all are literally the very first people getting a sneak peek at my new book, which is up and available on Amazon as we speak, with these tips to help us and the kids we serve in the aftermath of the most unprecedented and collective trauma of our time. So at the end of our webinar, when we're finished today, I'd like to answer whatever questions I can, if we have time, that would be helpful to our group. And also because I really value your time and input, everyone who stays with us till the end and chooses to share their email address with either of my websites through Ouchie Wrap or your Child and Family Solutions Consulting, which I know Ed's going to put those links in later in the presentation. He'll put them in the chat. Will automatically be entered into a drawing for a free paperback copy of my new book and also for a classic Ouchie Wrap. Finally, at the end of our webinar today, you will also receive a discount code toward free shipping for any purchase of any Ouchie Wrap item from our website. And also, I have discounted my books, both the e-version on Kindle as well as the paperback from the 25th through the 31st. So there's a 20% discount as well. For more than 25 years now, I've had the privilege of working with and serving kids, their teachers, and their families, just like you, right? Across the country in a variety of ways. But regardless of the role I was in, I was consistently working to ensure children's safety and well-being for their bodies, minds, and souls. And what has always brought me the most joy throughout my career is directly interacting with children, early care and education, teachers, and families, applying the research, that is, taking what we know and making it what we do. So over the past 3 years, I saw the need for a wearable therapeutic comfort object that helps calm and comfort all kids when they're overwhelmed or hurting, including those kids with special needs and sensory sensitivities. So I invented the Ouchie Wrap. But do you know what the hardest job I've ever had is? Go ahead and put it in the chat. What's your hardest job? For me, it's being a parent, being a mom. And really, there is so much overlap between being a mom or a parent and being a caregiver or educator for young children, especially when it comes to supporting kids' social and emotional health. With that in mind, before we dive into this material together, I want to recognize each of you. Thank you for what you do and have done day in and day out to support our most vulnerable children and families, even and especially in the midst of a historic collective traumatic event. I see you, I appreciate you, and I am so grateful for each of you. Now, let's do a quick pulse check on our own social and emotional health and see where everyone's at today. Using the chat with a number from 1 to 5, with 1 being not so great, this little red frowny face over here at the end, to 5 being, this is one of the best days I've had in a while, and I'm feeling pretty great. Go ahead and show where you're at today. I think I'm probably a 4 right now. I'm pretty happy, feeling great, but also pretty reflective and a little bit nervous too. So if you're a 5 today, please go ahead and share your joy to encourage all of us. Oh, I'm so sorry. What just happened there? Okay. And if you're feeling like a 1 today, just hang in there. We are here for you. And if you need more support, we'll show you a list of resources at the end of this presentation. You know, when I was talking with Ed and Alejandra about this project, I shared that especially over the past 2 years of having lived through this collective trauma, I think most of us have just been doing our best to keep going, just keeping up with life while taking it on the chin at nearly every turn. I mean, through it all, I just kept wondering, what have we learned about how to take care of children and ourselves and each other? And how do we do it well? Acknowledging that we may have lived through and experienced very different circumstances in the midst of our collective traumatic event, I think we all still share at least 3 things within families and within high quality early care and education environments. First, we love our kids, Of course, we love our kids. That's why we're here today, taking time to replenish our relationships and resources and meditate on what matters most. Second, this is hard. This is really hard. We must acknowledge that traumatic experiences have an impact on us as individuals, on our families, and on our children. We must take time to recognize when our lives feel like they've been shattered, our puzzle pieces have been scattered, and we need time to put ourselves back together again. We want to come through stressful and traumatic times as strong, healthy, and happy, as families, as educators, and as teams, better together. And I believe this is our goal, bearing each other's burdens, because we can also use our experiences and strengths to help support others throughout our journeys together. And isn't that what strong relationships are all about? Okay, let's take a deep breath and get ready to jump into this material together. Throughout our time together, we have at least 3 objectives today. First, to consider the impact of trauma on our social emotional well-being and that of our children. Secondly, to identify strong positive connections and nurturing relationships that provide us with the strength we need to tackle these challenges. Third, to explore calming and comforting practices and strategies that are going to support us and the needs of our kids as well as families throughout this time. We're going to ask ourselves questions that helps us take a deeper look at social emotional health and really focus in on these 5 tips to meet kids' needs and other tips to meet our own needs as we're putting ourselves back together. Specifically, we want to know what social emotional health is, why it matters, how our relationships affect us, how the pandemic has affected our kids, and how we can support them throughout this time. Again, let's take what we know and make it what we do. So what is social development then? And what do we know about social and emotional health? In general, it's how we interact with others. It's the ability to form and sustain relationships and attachments that we have with significant others, especially as children. It's the relationships we have first and foremost with our parents and families, and even with teachers that provide us with the foundation of how to interact with others. And with emotional development, we know it's the ability to not only recognize, but also interpret and respond to the behaviors and feelings of others. Together, it's how we support children's relatedness. And why does it matter? Well, it matters a lot, mostly because of how it initially depends upon our secure attachments. These are so critical. We know that secure attachments begin to form from the moment we come to life, take on new meaning that day we have our first cry, and continue throughout our lives with those who are caring for us. It's how we learn whether we can trust the primary people in our lives to be sensitive and responsive, protecting us from harm and offering us security. They meet our needs while help keeping us safe and secure. Truly, social emotional health is the key to all other learning, because when we know that we are safe and secure, we are loved, and we are going to get what we need to survive, then and only then can we concentrate on and fully embrace all of the other experiences in our lives to truly thrive. Does that sound familiar to any of us adults? I mean, and you can put that in the chat, that secure attachments are so critical. Again, it's how we learn whether we can trust the primary people in our lives to meet our needs and to keep us safe and secure. This is very likely familiar to those of us with Head Start hearts. In other words, we know, understand, prioritize, and practice looking at the whole child and the whole family. Then we make sure to give each child and family the support they need to reach their long-term optimal development. Recognizing that parents are children's first and most important teachers, it's important to acknowledge that parents need a healthy community to help raise healthy children. And guess what? Children's teachers need this essential support too. So let's take a moment to reflect on our relationships throughout a couple of quick exercises. The first is about our primary relationship. Right now, what I want you to do is close your eyes for just a moment. I want you to think about the primary person who loved you and raised you. How would you describe your relationship with that person from an attachment perspective? Did you trust that person? Was that person or those people meeting your needs, helping calm you in your distress, and keeping you safe and secure? Go ahead and put that in the chat if you're willing to share. And secondly, we want to take a moment to consider our relationship with a special teacher. What comes to mind for you when you think about your relationship with a special teacher, if you were fortunate enough to have one? And I want you to share that in the chat as well. Right, nurturing, loving, hugging. So we talked about how social emotional health is key to all other learning, especially for children. But why? Again, because when we know that we are safe and secure, we are loved, and we are going to get what we need to survive, then and only then can we concentrate on and fully embrace all of the other experiences in our lives to truly thrive. And you know why? Because we know that we matter. We literally form our identity through our primary and special relationships. We know that we can consistently invest in and depend on our relationships with those who love us and support us. Yes, even in times of trauma and trouble, and most definitely during the pandemic. Here, I chose to share a picture with you that I just love because it was something that I asked my daughter if she would please think about drawing or painting for an art program through the public schools. It was a couple of years ago, and the day she created this piece of art, I had to run out and do some errands. My kids were at home with their dad. When I came back, this is what I saw on the kitchen table. You see, across our country, the Parent-Teacher Association has a program where they ask students to use the arts to express themselves. Then the preschool and school-age students must reflect on why they made what they did and why they chose their specific titles. A couple of years ago, the theme was, I Matter Because. My daughter chose to entitle her work, I Matter Because God Loves Me. What made me so happy is that it's how she explained why she chose what she did. She went on to talk about how she matters because of who loves her, her identity, and how no matter what, even when she makes mistakes, she is still loved and treasured, ending with, that is why I matter. So why did I put primary relationships in the middle of this presentation on picking up the pieces and meeting kids' social and emotional needs? It's because that is exactly what I needed as I began to face the struggles and challenges in my own family. For our most recent trauma, the pandemic, I kept thinking, I can't do this on my own. This is so hard and this is so much and all at once. I wasn't prepared for this. I don't have a plan. And that's when I knew I had to dig deep. I relied on my primary relationships, people I could count on, strong, healthy, positive, and nurturing relationships, prayer, and meditation in my faith. I remember thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to manage this? How are parents and teachers of young children going to manage this? So not only was I seeking wisdom, but I also wanted physical protection, mental provision, and sound socio-emotional well-being. I wanted to be resilient in the face of trauma. In a nutshell, I knew I needed to calm myself to calm my children. And I believed making a plan to support my whole life, a healthy body, mind, and soul would help me achieve this. Guess what happened? I decided to give up control, stop focusing on figuring out my solutions to my problems, start focusing on everything I had to be grateful for, and start using my provisions, including my relationships, routines, and expertise, to help support others in ways that were so much bigger than me. As it turns out, these are just the sorts of things we not only need to do to be resilient in the midst of trauma ourselves, but also to do with and model for kids to help strengthen their capabilities of becoming resilient too. So what does it mean to be resilient? To have the ability to overcome serious hardship. Guess who else understands the importance of resilience and approaching health and well-being from a whole person perspective? Yes, you and me, those of us with Head Start hearts, and especially teachers. Caregivers, parents, and others who get the importance of expressing empathy, particularly through validating and reassuring children, not only help children feel safe and loved, but also give them essential tools to become resilient. Validating children helps them feel seen, heard, understood, and valued. An effective way to do this is to truly listen to them by getting down on their eye level, looking at them as they are talking to us, and reflecting back on what we hear them saying. I know you're doing this with the children and families you work with every day. Share it. Another way is to model for them how to express our own emotions by labeling the feelings. For example, I'm feeling sad that we can't hold hands with our friends right now. I wonder how you're feeling. Likewise, if the child expresses her emotions to us, we can restate these feelings. For example, it sounds like you're pretty sad that you can't hold hands with your friends right now. I understand. I feel sad too. By doing this, we're not only modeling for the child how to express our emotions, but we are also teaching the child how to identify and deal with negative feelings. In return, validating the child helps her stay calm and know how to deal with these same types of emotions in the future. While validating children helps them feel understood, reassuring children helps them feel safe. Every child wants and needs to be loved and protected. Providing a stable adult-child relationship for children comforts them and helps them feel secure. An effective way to reassure children, particularly during unpredictable or frightening traumatic times, is to provide consistency. And a great way to do this is through their daily routines because they're predictable. They can count on these familiar activities because they know what to expect. If, however, during traumatic events, your routines are interrupted, families and teachers can keep the same family or learning environment rules in place. Again, this reassures children by giving them something familiar to depend on. Altogether then, adults who love and support children give them what they need to feel valued, loved, understood, and safe. And when kids have at least one strong, nurturing adult-child relationship in place, they are much more likely to become resilient, especially in the face of trauma. Ultimately, by validating and reassuring children, we are positively supporting them in body, mind, and soul in ways that not only will help them in the short term, but also stay with them in the long term. You see this beautiful woman right here? Let me tell you about her. When I think of a teacher who built a uniquely reassuring routine into her daily time with children, I think of Miss Roberta. Now, this name actually is a pseudonym, and this is actually a picture of a model who very closely resembles our featured teacher, as I completed these observations throughout my research in a participating preschool program many years ago. Although it did not appear that her class or her community was enduring a collective traumatic event at the time, Miss Roberta embedded a daily routine into her roll call and check-in with each individual child in her care. At circle time, after calling the name of each 4-year-old child in her class, Miss Roberta had trained the children to share with her whether they were in pain or had any physical injuries. It went something like this. Amy, I'm here, Miss Roberta. I don't have any bumps, scrapes, or bruises, and I feel fine. However, Miss Roberta went beyond the initial health and safety status to incorporate a safe and predictable time for each child to share how they were feeling emotionally as well. Simply brilliant. What do you mean when you say, I feel fine? I'm happy today. I can see that you're happy. I see your smile. Thank you for sharing. Just imagine if a child was not feeling fine or happy, or perhaps did have some bruises on their body. They would have a regular and predictable way to share that with their teacher. You see, not only was Miss Roberta providing these children with rich experiences to prepare them for school, she was also equipping them with emotional capabilities that would prepare them for life as she empowered them with the capacity to communicate, and she made them feel safe. Miss Roberta had a Head Start heart. She focused on the whole child, and she was teaching each child how to thrive. Incidentally, as adults, when we have friends, family, or coworkers with whom we can really express ourselves, who will listen to us and empathize with us, and who will allow us to listen to and empathize with them, we have what we need to support our own well-being and to thrive too. Okay, I have a question for you. How many of us know that, especially as parents and certainly as teachers, things are not perfect and sometimes things just don't go according to plan, and we just need to come up with a plan B? Go ahead and put that in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. And isn't that what we had to do when the pandemic hit, and what we had to keep doing for some time? In March of 2020, we were handed a crisis none of us ever imagined having to deal with at all, let alone for such a long and unknown period of time. Yet here we are, 2 years later. The pandemic stayed for a while and had some sort of lasting impact on just about everyone, and there was no way around it. And as such, it has been classified as a traumatic event. And when it hit, I think most of us knew right away that we had to be willing to adjust if we were going to adapt and figure out how to be okay with it. To be honest though, I think we must admit that sometimes we're really not okay, even when we want to be. And importantly, as adults, we must be aware of how surviving a traumatic event affects us, as well as it has affected the children we love and care for. So let's look at what we now know about the impact of the pandemic and even virtual learning on our kids. On the left side of our table, you see the challenges and frustrations, and on my right, we see elements of virtual learning and its impact. According to the Center for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and many other professional groups dedicated to the well-being of children and families, the impacts of the pandemic are pervasive, and the way in which it changed how we were learning has impacted kids, families, teachers, and administrators too. This simple chart shows the key reasons why these events affected the social and emotional well-being of our kids. But my guess is that none of these entries here are really that surprising to you or me. I would venture to say that, however fortunate any of us may be in a given community, many of us have experienced more than one of these events in each of these two categories. In fact, for families with the greatest needs, especially for families facing poverty and chronic crises, it's much more difficult than for others. And actually, when it comes to increased screen time, you see the third bullet down under virtual learning. I want to acknowledge that kids are getting much more screen time in general. For example, at home with video games and social media as well. The reason this is so important is that it also coincides with and even contributes towards some of these same challenges. However, at the same time, I also want to point out that using this tech helps us connect. So it's not as simple as an all or nothing situation, as much as it is about moderation, and as a result, implementing routines with limits. Would you agree? Would you agree that having limits in place and creating a routine for whether and how we're using technology, especially with children, is a good idea in our learning environments and in our homes? And you know, for many other families, clearly, kids have experienced multiple stressors on top of what they're already facing each day and have been further traumatized as a result. So when we think about the impact of the pandemic, we can certainly focus on the positives, like more time together as families or deeper empathy for each other, as unique opportunities with unique benefits we have experienced throughout this unprecedented time. But it is also very important to realize that multiple stressors related to this event can affect our overall health and well-being directly and indirectly in ways that may require extra attention and support. Directly, in terms of our physical health, a major concern at the outset was whether we would get sick and how we would treat that once we did. And then indirectly, in terms of how the pandemic has impacted our children's social emotional health, which is ongoing. It is important to note that trauma experienced at this developmental stage can continue to affect children and young people across their lifespan. It's how we respond to the stress and deal with it that matters in the here and now, as well as in the long term, for every trauma that we face. And this is because kids can be particularly overwhelmed by stress related to any such events. So in this table, I'm just including the most common ways in which kids may show stress. And so I'm wondering, have any of you experienced any of these symptoms in your learning environments or in your families? I have. We definitely have. And it's tough. And it was really tough at the height of it all. But a couple of our biggest goals each day were, and still are, to give ourselves and our kids some slack, some extra grace, and to empathize with each other. Part of that grace and empathy comes about when we acknowledge and understand what our kids are truly experiencing. Although we may practically be through the pandemic, many of us are still picking up the pieces from this trauma or other related events that happened during that time frame. And as a result, it may be helpful to have a few concrete resources in hand, such as these free ebooks. In this first book, it addresses the direct impact of the coronavirus on our physical health. Now, I realize that this physical piece is no longer as worrisome. However, it also addresses how this pandemic was indirectly impacting our social and emotional health. As we see here on the left, some of the thoughts and feelings these kids are experiencing throughout their time at home. You see in the bottom left-hand corner with the young children fighting, and the little boy says, "Sometimes I feel angry." And over here you have a slightly older child saying, "Sometimes I feel sad." In the second book on the right, which may be geared towards slightly older children, kids are able to actively draw and color as they express their feelings. One gentle way to support children's emotional and mental health, particularly in the midst of stress and trauma, is to encourage them to express themselves through art. This is an example from my colleague and friend, Anna Rayner, creator of Creative Play LA. Anna also has generously written a beautiful free ebook that may be helpful to you as you work with your children. It is so powerful to give children open-ended materials to use because it's not about the product they create, it's about the process of what they're experiencing and expressing as they create. Giving children multiple ways to express themselves supports their emotional well-being. So just like we saw in the ebook, we know kids may have rough moments, tough days, or just a hard time altogether. In addition to providing creative, open-ended art experiences, some of the most effective ways we can help children work through these thoughts and emotions is to calm and comfort them by being that source of social connectedness for them. Having someone to listen to them, to talk to them, and definitely to play with them helps so much. We can be stable, that stability for them, just being there day in and day out and supporting them practically. Things like making meals, preparing snacks, and adhering to our schedules, and emotionally letting them know it's okay to feel sad or frustrated and validate their feelings. Again, talking with them and listening to what they have to say and helping them let it out. At the height of the pandemic, a medical doctor by the name of Stephen Moffat was asked, beyond taking health precautions, what is the best thing we can do for ourselves during this pandemic? His reply, have a good cry. It's okay to not be okay right now. Just let it all out. Okay, so I want to share a little story with you I like to call laundry room love. It was in the spring of 2020 when absolutely nothing was in person and everything was online only. And there were just a lot of additional things going on. You feel me, right? You know what I'm talking about. We lived through this. There were activities and deadlines with my work, with my husband's work, things constantly changing with the kids' schedules online and all the different computers trying to make that happen. 6 of us in the house all day, every day, while we were providing shelter for 2 extra family members. And all of this, plus additional expectations and things that were taking place within the school, as well as those activities, I just felt like everything was spinning out of control. The groceries were mounting, the dishes were mounting, the laundry was mounting, the baby was crying, and the dog was barking. You know what I mean, right? In that moment, it was just all so totally overwhelming. I remember it so clearly. My kids were at home. I walked from the kitchen into the laundry room, and it was there that it just hit me. It hit me so hard that I took a deep breath because I was trying to calm myself down, or at least reassure myself that it was going to be okay. And when I finally inhaled, it felt so good. But y'all, when I exhaled, what came out was more than a breath. It was tears, lots of tears. My tears began to fall and they were streaming down my cheeks. I just couldn't stop crying. It was like I was finally letting myself let it all out. And in that moment, when my kids heard me, and that's not how I normally go through my day, crying, so they immediately ran to me in the laundry room and they started to hug me. And they said, Mom, are you okay? And I said, it's all so much. It's just all so much. And I took a deep breath. And it was a beautiful moment that we shared. In that moment of that group hug, I realized I didn't need to try to be perfect, to be on top of it all. I didn't need to conform to some sort of societal idea or expectation, or even my own idea of being a super mom. I just needed to be real with them. I just needed to be their mom. And I'm so glad I did, because then they knew, hey, it's okay for me to let it out. It's okay for me to be real with how I feel in this moment. And it's okay if I'm not okay right now. So how do we really do that? I mean, what does that look like to keep calm and let it all out? Today, we're going to take a look at 5 specific tips to help our kids keep calm as we seek to thrive in the aftermath of a trauma. These are based upon parenting in a pandemic, recommendations from pediatricians and developmentalists across our nation, and specifically from the American Academy of Pediatrics. These 5 items are geared toward how we interact with and take care of our children. And look at number 5, special time in. Spoiler alert, this is my favorite calming tip and is most definitely my children's favorite too. We start with how to effectively address our children's fears, healthy routines, structuring the day, using positive discipline, and engaging in special time. And we complete our list with caregiver tips by taking care of ourselves. And let's look at these last 2 bullets. Why do you think these last 2 bullets are so important? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Yes, because they're for us, they're ours. We must take care of ourselves if we are going to take care of our families and also care for children. And because I just love y'all and I'm so incredibly grateful you took the time to be here, I want to give you a little gift right now. Before we dive into everything we can do for our kids, let's all take a deep breath. What's this for? Well, this is for us so we can relax. But the numbers I want you to remember are right there at the top of that picture, 4, 7, and 8. This is going to be our access code for what I call a beloved breath. And do you know why? Because this is how we are going to remember to love ourselves so that we can love others. What is our access code for this deep, relaxing breath? Go ahead and put it in the chat. You remember? It's right there. Hint, hint, it's in the picture. 4, 7, 8. Okay? All right, here we go. I'm going to want you to breathe. When we hear these numbers, we're going to inhale for a count of 4. Hold it for 7. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, and slowly exhale for 8. Now let's do it again. You ready? Okay, we're going to inhale. Hold it for 7. Slowly exhale for 8. That is your relaxing, beloved breath. Good job. I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, now that we're relaxed, let's dive into these 5 tips to support our kids together. Our first tip is to address children's fears. I love this picture on the left here. It's taken a couple of years ago. That's my daughter. In it, she's smiling, very happy in one of her favorite places, outside, climbing a tree, hanging out with me. But what you don't see is what happened before this happy picture. It was a particularly difficult day, one in which there were many, many tears, and I listened to her heart and decided we just needed to get out to really let it out. So we did. We went for a little drive, found a nice tree, had a good climb, let out the sadness, the fear, and all of the anxiety, then breathed in the calm. Together, we addressed her fears, And to reduce her anxiety, we engaged in deep breathing. We got moving, we wrote some things down, and we had plenty of hugs. I reassured her that we were going to get through this together, and sooner or later, everything was going to be okay. You can see here on this slide, there are several ways that we can help address our kids' fears. And even if what they are telling us isn't necessarily about the pandemic in particular, the fear of getting sick or of staying at home and not seeing others for an unknown period of time definitely has an impact on what kids are thinking and how they're feeling. So it's really good for them when we recognize and validate what they are expressing. And I want to take a moment to focus on these last two bullets. Now that we're practically through the worst part of this particular trauma, what is it that you're looking forward to? Or what is it that you were looking forward to that you're just now getting to experience for the first time? Go ahead and put that in the chat. I'll tell you, one of the simple things that my family and I wanted to do was go to a restaurant and have a meal where we could actually see other people and eat eventually when it was safe at the right time without our masks. And we have since done that. Something simple, but we thought it was important to look forward to that and celebrate. Okay, now let's talk about the importance of hugs. Do you like hugs? Is it just me? I'm a hugger. I love to hug. If I see you at a conference or something, I didn't get to go to NHSA this year, but if I see you or you see me, you know, and we're in a safe time, right? Let's just give each other a hug. Well, I want to tell you, guess what happens when we get hugs? And I mean good, long hugs. We instantly boost our oxytocin levels. You know, it sends a signal in our brain that decreases the stress while healing feelings of loneliness, anger, and isolation. And as we're hugging, particularly with someone who is a trusted person in our lives, it builds more trust and a sense of safety. It also lifts our serotonin levels, and that elevates our mood. It creates happiness. Yes, hugs make us happy. And it also strengthens our immune system. So do you see how difficult it was to go through that long period of time without really that many hugs? Or maybe within your home, you had others you were able to hug. But the research clearly shows us that when you hug heart to heart for at least 8, but if you can, go ahead and make it last for 20. 20 seconds is a long time. You'll notice other people might feel very uncomfortable if you hug them for 20 seconds. So try to keep it to those who are closest to you. But when you do, you're going to experience these benefits. So let's make sure we're giving and getting plenty of good long hugs safely whenever possible. Our second tip is to keep healthy routines. During the pandemic, and really in the midst of any traumatic event, it was and is more important than ever to maintain routines. Okay, go ahead and put in the chat why. Do you remember? We talked about this a few slides ago. Remember that consistency? Right. These healthy routines create a sense of order to the day. They offer reassurance. It's how we reassure children in a very uncertain time, a sense of normalcy when clearly hardly anything around us seems normal anymore. And this is true for all children, my itty bitties, my preschoolers, school agers like my kiddos, and even teenagers. They benefit from routines that are predictable yet flexible enough to meet individual needs. So can anyone guess why this first set of choices over here on my left, a piece of paper, is in what I call chicken scratch? It's not very neat. It's just kind of all scribbled out there together. You can put that in the chat. Well, I'm going to tell you, y'all, that's what I had. That's all I had. I had a pen, a piece of paper, and a marker, or I guess a few different colored markers. And so I was totally overwhelmed and frustrated the first couple of weeks. I couldn't seem to think straight with the turning on the dime that each of us had to do in a hot second, especially our teachers, and needed at least one way to set up some choices the kids could make that we could both be okay with. This gave them some control and me some peace, right? It's just like we do in our learning environments from day to day. And all while keeping activities from our previous routine while establishing a new one at the same time. So here I was just trying to contrast. You see on the left, there's that chicken scratch choices. And on the right, we've got this dry erase board. It's not really that much neater, but it's just a different period of time because in the spring, there was no predictable daily online school schedule. So just imagine if you're at work right now, you're at home, you got your kids all around you if you have kids, or you're living with someone who has kids. It just complicates everything, right? For them and for us. And then in the fall, we had a predictable daily school schedule, but with some built-in flexibility. So we made sure to incorporate other things that were really good for our kiddos, body, mind, and soul, as well as our own. And after school contributions were built into that as well. And this is an example of some of the simpler picture-based routines that I used with my kids when they were younger. Using pictures to communicate is also a great way to help kids who are not yet verbal, or who are nonverbal, or who have special learning accommodations and are dual language learners too. And in our routines, I wanted to highlight bedtimes. Does anyone know why? You want to put that in the chat? Why is it important to think about our bedtime routines? That doesn't happen when we're at preschool or school time. Remember that table that I showed you just a few slides ago when we talked about how kids show stress? It's because kids often have more trouble with bedtime during any stressful period. It's like they can't quite shut off their brains, or when they know they need to, then their fears, worry, or stress set in, leaving them wondering whether the next day will be more of the same or whether it will change. So we want to try to keep normal nighttime routines as much as possible. And our third tip is structuring the day. This was from spring of 2020. So at that time, we actually did, we had to keep our routine written out. I had to keep going. And we had to establish a new daily schedule at the same time, right? So we didn't keep this to the minute, obviously. We knew we needed to be flexible as well, but it just kind of gave us a general rhythm and a set of expectation for our day. And we were able to break up schoolwork, yet keep a general order. And so you see, like, getting dressed, getting ready, eating, schoolwork. We've had times for active play, quiet play, and then family time in the evenings. But just to keep things real, y'all, I need you to know that if I didn't have this written down, there is no way I would remember what I was supposed to do on any given day to take care of my own responsibilities, let alone what they were supposed to do. So to be sure you have what you need to meet kids' social and emotional needs while promoting their health in body, mind, and soul, and your own, I wanted to share this exercise from my book with you. Although we do not have time to stop in the middle of our 60-minute webinar, you can take a picture of this slide or jot down these notes to do this on your own, or when the slides are shared with you, you can refer to it then. But when structuring your day in just a couple of minutes, you can ask yourself some key questions, whether this is for you at home or you within your office or your learning environment that you're structuring for the children. Obviously, you have routines in place for them. But just to revisit and ask yourself some of these questions, really, is it healthy for bodies, minds, and soul? Plan out a chicken scratch routine of your own to be sure you and your kids are getting what you need to be healthy. And our fourth tip is using positive discipline. It's one evidence-based way that is significantly related to keeping kids calm, particularly during stressful times. These are characteristics of positive discipline. As a key foundation to their success is setting clear expectations, then following through by enforcing the rules. We know that, right? If we say something to the kids, but then we don't actually enforce what we said we were going to do, it means nothing. They're like, yeah, right. But when we do, they know they can trust us. So we got to follow through. We basically teach them that good choices have good consequences, including rewards and privileges. Of course, the opposite is also true. So poor choices lead to negative consequences. But I wanted to show you at least one example of a visual reminder that we use in our home to help keep us grounded. Our family rules boards. I started writing this out for my kids when they were about 4 years old. And I found that it really helped with the consistency in our home, just with myself from day to day, trying to remember, what did I say? What did I say I was going to do? How does this work? With my spouse, with any other adults, like grandma's coming to visit maybe, or babysitters, so that anyone who's in your home, we're all playing by the same rules with predictable consequences. So children know what to expect every time. Again, it's that consistency, right? right? We then, and you can't see these here, but we detailed out specific consequences that we felt were best suited and still feel for our family values and our kids' developmental age and stage. So for example, you see one of the bullets here with the use of timeouts. Well, that is a consequence. Some people approach it differently. We like to think of it as an opportunity to move away from whatever it was you were doing until you're able to take deep breaths, calm yourself, regain self-control, and then re-enter that activity or that peer group. So also with these rules, notice I wrote out what to do instead of what not to do, right? So like number 3, we keep our hands to ourselves instead of don't hit your brother, whatever it is. Also notice there are only 5 rules, and that's because that's about the number of rules kids can remember and keep in the front of their minds at this age. I mean, let's think about it. There are rules for school, rules for activities, and rules for clubs or our communities of faith, as well as rules for home. So keeping it short and simple is best. In this next slide, I included our personal family values board here because even though it isn't discipline per se, it's a visual and written way to reaffirm what we believe in our family and what we value. As you can see, 2 healthy family strengths identified by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network are shared family values and shared spirituality. It does not matter what that faith is, but when sharing it with your family members, it is yet one more way to protect them. It is a protective factor in the face of trauma and adversity. This is especially important to us now when each of us is experiencing a tremendous amount of stress and dealing with negativity too. And I think my favorite part is at the bottom. This is a mantra we gave to our kids when they were about 3 years old, and they were dealing with some tough stuff with a classmate who was having problems in their preschool and really was taking it out on them. So we did this to help them remember who they are, their true identity, and that they are loved, and that will never change, no matter what has taken place or what else is going on around them, even and especially on days when this mama bear just loses it for a moment. And it's such a good reminder for all of us, because let's face it, we're all human and we're going to make mistakes. This mantra is another form of self-talk and affirmation. And it is so good for kids to be able to reaffirm themselves internally as we are affirming them externally. So let me ask you this. Do any of you use a mantra for your kids or your family, whether it's in your early learning environment or in your home? Just go ahead and put that in the chat if you want to share it. Okay, now this last tip is my favorite. Remember the spoiler alert? And it's the kids' favorite too. We call it special time. We started it with our kids when they were about 4 years old. And don't get me wrong, we certainly played and spent quality bonding time with our kiddos one-on-one, as well as together since they were itty bitty. And remember, this is hard because they're twins. So they were always together, like they came as a set. But it was about at the age of 4 years that we intentionally put it into our regular routine each day. And can I just be totally real with you for a second? Do you want to know why we needed to do that so intentionally in our family? Well, I'm going to tell you. Because as 2 overwhelmed and overworked parents with 2 beautiful young children who wanted nothing more than to spend time with us, we realized that what we were doing was working well with one of our kiddos, but not as well with the other. That kiddo needed a lot more intentional, emotional, heart-to-heart connection in different ways. And it was a lot harder with that child. But with special time, letting our child choose the activity, letting us choose the time, and setting one-to-one time aside to just have fun and emotionally connect together each day for even just 10 minutes absolutely filled their emotional buckets at a time when they had just gotten too empty. So needless to say, we love our special time. It doesn't always happen every day now that they're older and so busy with their activities, but it has made a huge difference in keeping our emotional buckets full. And on a personal note, I need to tell you that it was just a few years later that we learned the kiddo that we were having the harder time connecting with is actually twice exceptional. That child is profoundly gifted with severe ADHD, sensitivities, sensory processing issues, and stealth dyslexia as well. So there's a reason why that child needed to connect in different ways. And, you know, that child is just as awesome as our other kiddo. And we're learning still every day how best to connect and to get that kid's needs met. And now shifting from meeting kids' needs to meeting our own needs, we're going to look at 2 caregiver tips. Okay, caregivers, teachers, parents, these are for us. I always think about what we're taught to do when traveling with a child on an airplane. What do they say? Should the cabin lose air pressure, right? See our flight attendant over here on this slide? Put on your own mask first. Remember to breathe normally. The way that the National Child Traumatic Stress Network frames self-care is through these 3 basic aspects: awareness, balance, and connection. I call these the ABCs. And the way I like to think about maintaining our overall health and well-being is through our body, mind, and soul. So I want to apply the ABCs to our body, mind, and soul. Let's look at them together. A is for awareness. It's simply determining how we're doing across each aspect of our lives, then asking ourselves whether the way we're behaving is consistent with the person we want to be. The B is for balance. After considering each aspect of our lives, we need to think about how we can give ourselves opportunities to rest and relax, whether physically, mentally, or emotionally. And the C is for connection. In the final step, this involves building connections and supporting relationships with people around us and those who are important in our lives. Why do you think this last step is so important? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Why is connection the most important? Well, I'm going to tell you why. It's because it reduces isolation, it eliminates loneliness, and social connection is one of the most powerful stress reducers we have. So you know we were stressed during this long period of isolation because we were very limited in our social connections other than virtually. And here you see some strategies for how we can support our overall health in body, mind, and soul. And if you can do any of these activities with others, you can strengthen your connections at the same time. And for our second caregiver tip, who remembers our access code? Remember our access code for relaxing breath? What were those numbers? You can put them in the chat if you want, or maybe you just want to hold on to it. Okay, those are 4, 7, and 8. So now to celebrate, for those who are willing and able, repeat after me. This is tough, whatever this is. I can do this, and we'll get through this. I call this Mama's mantra, but really it's a mantra for anyone. And now it's time for a sanity stretch, okay? We're gonna have to fill in a blank here in just a moment. So I want you to be thinking of a word that best describes you in your role as a caregiver to the children entrusted to you to raise, teach, encourage, and inspire. What is your role? Is it parent, mom, dad, foster mama, teacher, administrator, grandpa, whatever it is, wherever you're at? If you're able and willing, please stretch out your arms. Stretch, 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 farther, 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 all the way out, all the way out. Oh, it feels so good. Stretch, stretch, stretch. Now, take a deep breath. Cross one arm over your chest. Maybe the other one can rest on your ribs down here. Raise your arm up high enough for your wrist to rest on your shoulder and give yourself a pat on the back. Good job. Okay, now don't drop your arms. Leave them there. We're going to move right into our huge hug. Now you're going to move that other arm from your ribs to your opposite shoulder. Put them where they're comfortable, okay? And you're going to fill in that blank. And you're going to tell yourself, I am a great parent. Whatever your role is. I'm a great mom. I'm a great teacher. I'm a great grandma or dad or maybe foster mama, whatever it is. And just give yourself a hug. I really want you to squeeze, 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 squeeze. Oh, it feels so good. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. It's okay if you start to cry because this just might be the first time in a long, long while you've had a hug and a deep breath and that you've heard, I'm doing a great job. You are doing a great job. I mean, you're here, right? You're investing in yourself, your coworkers, your relationship. Keep squeezing. your relationship with your kids, and your relationship with your family. Okay? When you're ready, relax and just exhale and let go. Okay, remember how we said in the beginning to give your kids some extra grace and to cut them some slack? Well, that goes for you too. So briefly, reflecting on all that we've covered together throughout this webinar today, what did we learn? We made it through, and we will continue to make it through whatever comes our way. Whatever it is, we will get through this. Traumatic events such as the pandemic and virtual learning most certainly have an impact on our social and emotional health. They also cause stress. But as we work through these challenges, they also give us an opportunity to practice calming, comforting, and connecting, particularly with our primary nurturing relationships. Also, we learned how our relationships and connections with each other are essential to our well-being. That's why we're here. Let's connect with each other and help each other remember how to keep calm. What else did we learn? We have learned a lot about calming tips with many different examples, and we have each had the opportunity to even create one for ourselves. You can take what you know and make it what you do. Most importantly, relationships matter, connections matter, our hearts matter, and hugs make us happy. You and your family matter, and you are not alone. Finally, remember, whatever trauma you may be facing, we'll get through this. Strong, healthy, happy, and better together. If you or someone you care about needs additional support, please refer to your local resources within your community or contact these national resources for help. And if you would like to try a comfort object that kids can wear and be soothed by, you may want to check out an Ouchie wrap. Also, you can enter into the drawing for a free wrap when you scan in this QR code and enter your email address. Or I think Ed's also going to put the link to the website in the chat. Here you see on the right-hand side, I'm featuring our Love Your Tribe wrap because I designed it to benefit my dear friend Stephanie Fletcher, Mama Bear of 4, as she battled breast cancer. Currently, she is cancer-free, but she must continue to fight to remain that way. Steph is one of my super nurturing connections. You see, when a mama elephant is having a baby elephant, her tribe, her entire tribe of female elephants circles around her, stomping and kicking up dirt to protect the baby and the mama from outsiders and attackers. So for the sale of each of these special Love Your Tribe Ouchie wraps, we're going to donate 30% of the proceeds directly to Stephanie and her family to help offset the costs of her ongoing treatments. Please visit us at Ouchie Wraps if you want to be part of Steph's tribe too. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, for each email submitted using the QR code on the previous slide or the link in the chat to my Ouchie Wraps website or to my Your Child and Family Solutions website, you're automatically entered into the drawing for either a classic Ouchie wrap or a paperback copy of my new book. And for those of you who would like to purchase the book, you can use, the discount that I've put up on Amazon today for you that will last through the 31st. And if you'd like to purchase an Ouchie wrap, you can use the code REAG9HSA for Region 9 Head Start Association, and that will give you free shipping on the purchase of any of our Ouchie wrap products from now until the 31st. So thank you so very much for taking the time to participate in our webinar today and to find ways to pick up the pieces as you meet kids' social and emotional needs while putting yourself back together. My hope is that you will be blessed as you calm and comfort and truly love each other. Back to you, Ed.
Well, wonderful, Amy. What a great set of tips, strategies, reminders, some that are just fundamental, tried and true, and others that are so unique and need to be continually reshaped as our children age and our families reset. I have adult children, but we are still in the process of establishing routines and creating agreements as we go forward into that next chapter of their lives. So it's always work that's in progress and always work that's comes from the heart. I love your Head Start Hearts concept. Of course, that touches all of us do so much appreciate the grace that you began the call with. Our hearts do go out to our friends in Texas, to people, to families and all. This recording will be placed up on the YouTube site for the Region 9 Association in about 48 hours. A reminder or an email with that link will come out to you, along with additional details from this webinar, including evaluations. So please give us your feedback. But thanks to everyone who stayed with us. It's a little bit after the hour of 12, and I recognize we've gone beyond our 60 minutes, but it's content that's been so well worth it. Thank you for being with us, Amy. And thanks to everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon and a safe upcoming 3-day weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed.